print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Corrine, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the August 17th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Thank you for joining us today. The highlights under business and finance are: stock-picking funds continued to perform poorly, even in the age of artificial intelligence, against their benchmark passive fund alternatives, Morningstar data show. The revamped Whopper is helping propel a comeback for Burger King, which has been drawing diners at a swifter rate than both McDonald's and Wendy's, and whose restaurant sales are growing faster. Federal prosecutors examining Mark Walters' businesses are focused on 4 entities that served as intermediaries between insurance companies he controlled that made loans to businesses that he also controlled. FINRA found that people who use social media for investment advice rate their knowledge of investments higher than those who don't, but perform worse on an objective knowledge test. The End of Oak Street made its film box office debut at number 3, earning $21 million in domestic ticket sales. Booking.com chief executive Glenn Fogel added his voice to the public's disdain for the conditions of contemporary travel, saying, "You can't believe you even bothered." Many businesses, some still smarting from being late to the artificial intelligence boom, are today spending big on the promise of quantum computing. Everyday classic cars such as Honda Civics and Toyota Corollas of a certain vintage have become a boon to insurers, which are underwriting more policies on them. Now for the key articles under the Worldwide section. NATO warplane shot down a drone that entered Romanian airspace and appeared to be Russian in origin. The second downing of a drone in Alliance airspace in 3 days. Trump said he would substantially reduce joint military exercises with South Korea, touting his very good relationship with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The U.S. admiral overseeing the war with Iran visited the Abraham Lincoln as the aircraft carrier prepares to return home following an extended wartime deployment. Iran accused Qatar of holding 3 of its Air Force pilots prisoners, deepening a mystery that dates back to the beginning of the war. Rescue teams in eastern Indonesia recovered 6 more bodies, a day after a magnitude 7.7 earthquake, raising the death toll to 53. Crews battled a wildfire in eastern Belgium that has burned about 12 square miles in the High Fens, a large nature reserve. A team of builders uncovered $10 million worth of gold during construction work at the site of an old Belgium brewery set to be used as a homeless shelter. With Jair Bolsonaro under house arrest, the future of Brazil's conservative movement now rests with his eldest son, 45-year-old Flavio Bolsonaro. Died Tommy John, 83, namesake of a pioneering elbow surgery that saved his baseball career. Bao Meng, 85, rare survivor of a 1970s Khmer Rouge torture center. The picture on today's front page shows two young men pulling a canoe through what appears to be flood waters, and it has packages and plastic bags inside the canoe. And that caption reads, "Inundation. Evacuees haul belongings by canoe in Indianapolis on Sunday after the White River had swollen to a record crest following heavy rain. At least 6 storm-related deaths were reported in the state. A break in the rain is expected Monday." The article, "At least 6 are dead in Indiana storms," by Jennifer Kalfas. At least 6 people have died in Indiana as a series of storms led to historic flooding in the Midwestern state. Heavy rain over several days caused significant flooding along the White River, which flows through Indianapolis and central and southern Indiana. Early Saturday, the river crested at nearly 25 feet in central Indiana, surpassing a record set in 1913, according to the National Water Prediction Service. President Trump approved a request for federal assistance over the weekend, state officials said. The Indiana Department of Homeland Security said at least 6 people, including a 4-year-old boy and an 86-year-old woman, have died in storm-related incidents over the past week. Heavy rainfall has moved eastward from the Midwest to the central Appalachians, the National Weather Service said, bringing the threat of flash flooding to West Virginia. Other articles from the front page follow. Little-known China company faces scrutiny for funding Iran. Hengli has denied accusations that it imported crude that was under sanctions. By Patricia Kausman, Rebecca Feng, Anika Aurora Seth, and Costas Parrish. And there's a picture showing a port, and it says an aerial view of a Hengli Group petrochemical industrial park on the Shangxing Island in China's northeast. Chinese leader Xi Jinping last year summoned dozens of leaders from the nation's top private companies to a rare meeting, calling on them to help China navigate economic difficulties. Sitting with luminaries such as Alibaba's Jack Ma and DeepSeek founder Liang Wenfeng, state media reported was a 55-year-old man named Chen Jianhua, founder of a company called Hengli Group. To the outside world, Hengli, which in Chinese means eternal strength, may not ring a bell, but inside China, it has become an industrial juggernaut, with operations spanning petrochemicals, textiles, and shipbuilding. It employs more than 300,000 people and records revenue north of $100 billion a year, more than Tesla or Boeing, according to the company's website. It has also become a major importer of illicit Iranian crude, according to industry analysts, shipping brokers, and U.S. Treasury, which imposed sanctions on the company's refinery business this year, saying it bought billions of dollars of Iranian petroleum. Hengeli's other businesses didn't face sanctions. U.S. officials said Hengeli is one of the biggest players in a vast ecosystem of teapot refineries in China that for years have been buying oil that was under sanctions. China's purchases of Iranian oil, mainly thanks to teapots, topped more than $30 billion last year, soaking up nearly all the country's exported petroleum and bankrolling Iran's theocratic regime, according to a March report by the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission. Hengeli and other similar Chinese companies are able to buy the oil at a steep discount to market prices, boosting profits. Hengeli didn't reply to request for comment. Stock pickers perform poorly, as usual. Even with AI boost, just 27% of large cap funds did better than indexers over a year. By Jack Pitcher. Investment pros say AI disruption has created a stock pickers market. They are still struggling to pick the right ones. Just 27% of actively managed U.S. large cap equity funds beat their benchmark passive fund alternatives in the 12 months ended June 30th, according to Morningstar data that compares returns after fees. That is actually an improvement over stock picking funds' long-term record. In the decade through June, just 13% of active large cap funds beat their benchmarks. The fees on actively managed mutual funds have been a cash cow for investment firms for decades, but years of outflows from investors moving to more tax-efficient and often passive exchange-traded funds are weighing heavily on the industry. If you look at active equity mutual funds, they've had outflows every year, consistently since 2015, said Matthew Bartolini, head of SPDR, America's research at State Street Global Advisors. That's a losing trend only compared to the New York Jets. In recent Wall Street marketing and outlook materials, stock picking is still all the rage. Active managers argue that higher interest rates have ended the cheap money tide that lifted all boats, just as AI is set to mint huge winners and losers, making security selection crucial. Conditions have shifted to favor active investing, T. Rowe Price declared. AI means active stock selection will be increasingly important, Janice Henderson said. Finally, active managers can participate and join the passive money makers, Jeffrey CEO Rich Handler said in a recent letter to clients. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The country Hicks, who refused $26 million from AI. A Kentucky mother and daughter turned down a life-changing offer to build a data center on their farm, dividing the town. By Eric Schwartzel, Maysville, Kentucky. The offer arrived out of nowhere just over 1 year ago. An unknown company was scooping up Kentucky farmland, and few plots were more valuable than those owned by Decia Bear and her mother, Ida Huddleston. The money would be life-changing. But Bear's farm, the company wanted 463 acres at $48,000 apiece. But Huddleston's nearby piece of property, it sought 71 at $60,000 per acre. Together, mother and daughter would collect $26.48 million. At first, the women agreed. Then they discovered what their farmland, the farmland that their family had cultivated for nearly 200 years, would be used for: a 2.2 gigawatt hyperscale data center. That turned their answer into an easy one: no. Kick rocks and don't come back, Bear told the representative after successfully revoking the agreements. Since that $26 million refusal, Bear and Huddleston, two self-described country hicks, have become polarizing heroes of the rural campaign against AI. If computing power is, as OpenAI chief executive Sam Altman has said, the currency of the future, then communities like Maysville, population 8,700, are being asked to serve as the reserves. The industry's arrival has brought overnight changes, in some cases boosted tax bases and multi-million-dollar payouts for landowners, but also fears about cost, water usage, noise, and in Maysville, allowing in an unknown piece of the future. I never thought I'd be battling with a data center, said Bear. I thought I was about as far out in the boondocks as you could get. She and her mother are unlikely Silicon Valley adversaries. Bear, 54 years old, is God-fearing and transgressive, often in the same breath, with domestic trouble in her past. Diabetes has left her nearly blind. She calls cows to breakfast with a holler and extemporizes on the Bible in full paragraphs. Her mother is an 83-year-old church-going widow who walks with a cane. One of us is blind and the other's crippled, said Huddleston. Their homestead fed the family during the Great Depression and supplied the timber to build the main home. The AI company's offers valued their acreage at nearly 10 times what they could expect to fetch on the open market. But Bear values her land more than anything else on earth. How Burger King redid the Whopper and beat Wendy's, by Heather Haddon. To overhaul its signature Whopper, Burger King added a more premium bun, new mayonnaise, a box to preserve freshness, and a corporate chef who had already worked magic at chicken chain Popeyes, overseen by Burger King's U.S. head chef, Amy Alarcon, who developed the Popeyes chicken sandwich that became a viral sensation in 2019. The revamped Whopper is now helping propel a comeback for the chain. Burger King has lately been drawing diners at a swifter rate than both McDonald's and Wendy's, and its restaurant sales are growing faster. Probe of Dodgers owner tightens focus, by Joe Wallace, Justin Bear, and Margot Patrick. Federal prosecutors digging into Mark Walters' business empire are focused on four entities that served as intermediaries between insurance companies he controlled that made loans to businesses that he also controlled. People familiar with the matter said. Prosecutors and Securities and Exchange Commission are investigating whether Walter, the chief executive of Guggenheim Partners, who owns the Los Angeles Dodgers and various other businesses, or his companies committed fraud by concealing financial connections while borrowing billions of dollars from insurers he controls. The main entities investigators have narrowed in on, the People said, are ABS Capital, a Miami outfit funded by two former Guggenheim executives, Amistad Financial, an investment company that owns Equa Trust, a life insurer once controlled by Guggenheim and Walter, Bradford Allen, a Chicago-based commercial real estate broker with long ties to Guggenheim, and Hudson Trading, another Chicago firm. Proceeds from the loans made by the insurers passed through entities purportedly controlled by each of these firms before being used to fund other Walter-linked businesses, the People said. Walter and his businesses haven't been accused of crimes. We have always acted in good faith, and insinuations that we have in any way attempted to circumvent our obligations is simply false. A spokesman for TWG Global, Walters Conglomerate, said, "We are proud of the business that we have built and the value we have created for our clients, investors, and shareholders." Insurance companies, which invest policyholder premiums in bonds and other debt investments, are allowed to lend to so-called affiliated entities, those with ties to the insurer's owner, as long as the loans are disclosed. Following questions from prosecutors about TWG's business practices, and internal review found some $20 billion in affiliated loans that hadn't been properly disclosed. Walter's empire is now seeking to raise money, including by restructuring or selling off assets. Last weekend, an offer from Josh Kushner and Bob Iger led to Walter agreeing to sell the Los Angeles Lakers at a record $12.5 billion valuation, a rapid turn of events that came just 1 year after he bought the basketball team. Prosecutors' interest in Hudson Trading was reported earlier by Bloomberg News. The investigation comes as regulators are starting to take more interest in the opaque world of private credit, which took off after the financial crisis of 2008-9 and has become a rival to banks and extending loans to businesses. A big chunk of the money fueling that industry is coming from life insurers, such as the ones Walter owns. From designing benches to drones, her company was making furniture. Now she helps drive a defense company. By Matthew Luxmore, Kyiv, Ukraine. 2 weeks after the war began, the woman who would later revolutionize Ukraine's drone capabilities was driving through a town near Kyiv when her car came under Russian fire. Irina Turek, the young owner of a small furniture company, sped out of the town of Bucha with her ailing mother in the passenger seat. She published a photo of a bullet hole in her car's rear bumper and a defiant manifesto. "I'm one of those women who doesn't know how to fight," she wrote on Instagram in March 2022. "But I'm sure of one thing. I'll do absolutely everything in my power to make sure nothing of this sort ever happens in my country again." Today, the 34-year-old Turek is Chief Executive and Chief Technical Officer of Firepoint, a defense company with 7,000 employees whose long-range drones and missiles are hitting targets across Russia and helping Ukraine to shift the balance of war. Other articles from within the paper follow. Financial advice that is flying all over TikTok. Of those who got financial advice on social media, 41% have a high level of trust. By Elise Gongalves. Open a Roth IRA. Buy this stock before it pops. Make $100,000 a month by starting your own side hustle. A sea of financial advice courses through TikTok users' phones each day. This money-minded self-help is far more widely available and less regulated than the traditional financial services industry, and it is increasingly driving the way people manage their money. Fidelity Investments credits these financial influencers in part for the skyrocketing number of people who are opening Roth IRAs and the 73% rise in contributions to them among Gen Z's year over year in the second quarter of 2026. The Financial Industry Regulatory Authority found that those who use social media for investment advice rate their investment knowledge higher than those who don't, but perform worse on an objective knowledge test. They are also more susceptible to investment fraud. NATO takes out suspected Russian drone by Daniel Michaels. NATO warplanes on Sunday shot down a drone that entered Romanian airspace and appeared to be Russian in origin, the second downing of a drone in Alliance airspace in 3 days. The downings are a fresh sign of spillover from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Sunday's downing was the fourth over Romania since the war began in 2022. Early this past Friday, NATO scrambled 4 jet fighters to shoot down a foreign drone that entered Latvian airspace. Latvia's Ministry of Defense didn't identify that drone's origin, but said it had entered the country's airspace as a result of Russian electromagnetic warfare. Romania detected an incursion from neighboring Moldova early Sunday morning local time, and NATO forces based in Romania scrambled 2 Spanish Air Force F-18s on rotation to the region. One of the jets shot down the drone over an unpopulated area in the country's east, Romania said. The incident is under investigation, but the drone appears to be Russian and appears to have entered Romania from Moldovan airspace following another overnight attack on Ukraine by Russia, said U.S. Army Colonel Martin O'Donnell, spokesman for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's military command. It is rare for the alliance to point a finger at Moscow so quickly. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the editorial page, The $1.4 trillion state tort raid on Meta. Plaintiff attorneys want to turn social media into the next big tobacco. States and their friends in the plaintiff bar are copying the campaign against big tobacco to raid big tech. This week, a trial kicks off in federal court where 4 states, California, Colorado, Kentucky, and New Jersey, argue that Meta misled the public on harms of social media to young minds. Nobody should be deceived into thinking these lawsuits will help children. Meta now faces thousands of lawsuits in state and federal courts, alleging that it fueled an epidemic of youth mental illness. There's no question more young people are experiencing mental troubles as smartphones and social media have become ubiquitous. But mass torts won't solve this complex cultural problem. The real goal of state attorneys general and plaintiff lawyers is to barrage Meta with lawsuits and then pressure it into an enormous financial settlement a la with tobacco companies in the late 1990s. As Meta seeks to compete in artificial intelligence with OpenAI, Anthropic, and Chinese open weight models, the litigation is a costly distraction. This spring, a federal jury found Meta and YouTube liable for one young woman's mental spiral and awarded $6 million in damages. Meta is appealing the verdict, but thousands of such claims loom. Meta, in May, settled a lawsuit by a small Kentucky school district for $9 million. This month, a New Mexico judge ordered Meta to pay $567 million to abate an alleged public nuisance caused by its platform. That followed a $375 million penalty by a New Mexico jury this spring for misleading users about the safety of its platforms. More than 40 other state attorney generals have filed lawsuits making similar claims. In the bellwether trial that starts this week in Oakland, California, the 4 states are seeking $1.4 trillion, yes, trillion, in damages. That's nearly Meta's market value, $1.5 trillion. They claim the company designed Facebook and Instagram to maximize profits and deployed harmful features that addict children and teens to their severe mental and physical detriment, all the while misleading the public regarding the existence and severity of these risks, to quote California Attorney General Rob Bonta. Because the states are making claims under their general laws for consumer protection and unfair business practices, they do not have to prove that Meta caused harm to specific individuals. The AGs instead lean on public statements by Meta executives saying the company prioritized youth safety, which allegedly are in conflict with platform features that keep young people scrolling. Meta argues it implemented measures to protect young users from predators, such as restricting direct messages from adults. It also added features that remind teens to take a break if they have been scrolling for long periods, while allowing them to impose daily time limits on their usage. In response, the Attorney Generals claimed these tools were intended to provide a patina of safety, but didn't stop compulsive use. It's certainly true that Meta could have done more to limit the amount of time teens spend on its platform. But the regrettable reality is that those users would have likely switched to other apps or video games. States also claim Meta committed unfair business practices by letting users create multiple Instagram accounts, which they say allows kids to circumvent parental controls and rules, barring children under age of 13 from creating accounts. Meta deactivates accounts that it suspects are underage, but the AGs argue if one account gets blocked, underage users can switch to another. The AGs also claim Meta violates the 1998 Children's Online Privacy Protection Act because it doesn't do enough to block underage users who misrepresent their age. But for years, Congress has debated whether and how to require platforms to verify user ages. This has been a sticking point in discussions over new children's online safety legislation. The AGs are trying to punish Meta for failing to take actions that Congress and even their own states can't agree on. Some states in recent years have passed laws seeking to address problematic youth use of social media, including banning smartphones in schools and requiring parental consent for minors to create accounts. Such laws might do some good, but the legal attacks on Meta merely let politicians pretend to protect children, while the trial lawyers reap giant paydays. Talk about exploiting children for political profit. Republicans can end an inflation tax. After inflation, the effective tax on capital gains can reach 51%. Republicans may have only one more chance to pass major legislation this year, and one question is whether they'll include any economic reform worth the effort. One idea would be to index the capital gains tax to inflation finally. After the Biden price surge, it would be big relief to middle-class taxpayers. The statutory tax on long-term capital gains tops out at 23.8%, including the Obamacare surcharge. This rate applies to nominal gains, unadjusted for inflation. As a result, sellers of assets end up paying taxes on inflated gains, raising the effective tax rate. Economists have long understood this problem. Our friend Arthur Laffer recently ran updated calculations showing how high the cost can be, assuming an asset is held for 5 years and earns a 5% inflation-adjusted annual return. In that scenario, starting since inflation took off in 2021, he finds the effective tax rate on real capital gains has climbed to 51%, up from about 30% in the second half of 2010s. That isn't as bad as a peak inflation-adjusted tax rate of nearly 130% on capital gains in the 1970s. That's not a typo, and it helps explain the economic dysfunctions of the era. But the line on Mr. Laffer's chart has moved in the wrong direction after several good decades in which inflation was low and politicians still understood how damaging capital taxation can be to economic growth. The fix is to let taxpayers step up their tax basis in line with inflation. It's also a political opening for Republicans otherwise struggling to connect to midterm voters on the economy. Capital gains tax cuts have a record of stimulating investment and economic growth, and optimism about rising tides is a contrast to the Democratic turn toward punitive income and wealth taxes. The change would help the middle class. About 74% of returns that filed a capital gain in 2022 had household incomes of less than $200,000, according to Internal Revenue Service data parsed by Americans for Tax Reform. Profits on selling a home are taxed as capital gains, and though there's an exclusion for the first $250,000 or $500,000 per couple, empty nesters after the Biden inflation might be above that. To that point, here's a chance for Republicans to lay down a marker on inflation. Bad government policies fed the price increases of the past 5 years. Now the temptation is for politicians to capitalize, literally, on their own mistakes as inflation pumps up tax revenue. The income tax brackets are indexed to inflation already, which leaves capital gains to suffer from an unjust inflation tax. The country needs someone to stand for the idea that yesterday's overspending and inflation shouldn't become tomorrow's tax on investor and homeowner gains that exist only on paper. Republicans still have time to do it. A crisis in U.S. naval readiness revealed. Democrats bemoan the USS Abraham Lincoln, but won't fund the Navy. Democrats this week are expressing outrage over press reports of low morale and tough conditions aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, the aircraft carrier deployed for 250 days, much of it supporting President Trump's military action in Iran. This is a new level of chutzpah from the party that won't pass a bill to finance military operations, and the causes of declining naval readiness aren't new or mysterious. Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal wrote the Defense Department this week expressing serious concerns about the Lincoln. The press is publishing accounts from family members about working and living conditions on the ship. They're pushing our servicemen and women to the limit, Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego posted online, and Democratic leader Chuck Schumer called for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to be fired. Mr. Hegseth has denied the press reports of sparse food and bad plumbing, and anecdotal accounts should be viewed cautiously in a crew of about 5,000. When similar reports emerged from the USS Gerald Ford earlier this year, Chief of Naval Operations Daryl Caudell later told Congress the ship's plumbing was less than a 1% problem of about 6 million toilet flushes on the deployment, usually due to misuse like a flushed rag. In my years in the Navy, it wouldn't be a sea story if there wasn't some embellishment. Hung Chow, acting Navy Secretary, said at the time. The USS George Washington is on the way to relieve the Lincoln. Some 200 consecutive days at sea is a physical and mental sacrifice. And if Democrats are so concerned, perhaps they could expedite passage of the $17 billion for U.S. military operational cost that the administration requested. Democrats have been refusing to pass a special appropriation for Iran, lest anyone think they support the commander-in-chief. The underlying problem is that the U.S. burns naval power faster than it produces it, and the readiness spiral precedes the Trump administration. The U.S. Navy aims for 6 or 7 month rotations for carriers, but deployments regularly run 9 months. The USS Gerald Ford this year returned from a record 326 days deployed. The USS Dwight Eisenhower deployed in 2023 for about 270 days, and the USS Harry Truman did in 2024 for 251 days. That means longer and more expensive maintenance and more stress on personnel who may decide to leave the service. When it goes 8-9 months, Admiral Caudle said this year, those critical components that weren't expecting to repair are now on the table. So the work package grows. A stressed carrier force is a sign that the U.S. doesn't have sufficient naval assets to cover U.S. interests around the globe. It will require sustained resources to expand the fleet with a more diverse mix of ships and to recruit the sailors needed to man them. If Democrats don't want to help, and they probably don't given their sharp move to the left, this is a worthy priority for Republicans in Congress. Yet the GOP seems ready to abandon the president's $350 billion defense request as part of a reconciliation bill. Everything in Washington these days turns partisan. But Mr. Trump's decision to strike in Iran didn't cause the Navy's readiness dysfunction. It exposed the problem to a larger public audience. The open question is whether the country will start the long and hard work of turning the national aircraft carrier that is the U.S. Navy. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From Peggy Noonan. Trump is starting to look precarious. Iran, the economy, an insurgency that becomes a government is eventually responsible for conditions. It has seemed to me this summer that people avoid the subject of Donald Trump as much as possible. What is there to say? People stand where they stand. No one expects to win anybody over. The subject is both boring and harrowing, so why disturb the moment? A classically conservative insight is that no mere political figure should be given the power to fully colonize your brain and heart, so going to other topics is a good impulse. But I think something has been happening while we haven't been talking about him. His position in the political cosmos is changing. In some new way, good fortune is not on Mr. Trump's side. There is a precarity there. All this is connected, obviously, to the dangerous mess of Iran. Widespread economic anxiety and a rise in the energy and electoral success of the left, which hates him and in its political bloodlust apes him. All this is expressed in his approval ratings. The Real Clear Politics average has him at 39% job approval, 59% disapproval. The Economist this week had a piece titled, "How Unpopular is Donald Trump?" Its own poll found him dramatically underwater, 34% to 61%. The magazine said voters are uneasy about the president's ability to deal wisely with an international crisis. Mr. Trump has survived bad numbers before. I think people enjoy registering disapproval of his leadership, whether they voted for him or not. But there's no denying the current erosion of his position. His political problem with Iran is not only that the conflict is dangerous and unresolved, or that his attempts at diplomatic resolution seem half-baked, but that almost 6 months in, he seems utterly out of his depth, like someone who wouldn't have gone in there had he understood history or the nature of Iran's leadership. Another problem, from the beginning, much of Mr. Trump's political persona was based on his rejection of foreign adventures. Now he's launched a war of choice that has produced a strategic maze. Regular people watching all this peripherally, as regular people do, would be thinking, is this a new forever war? Are we running out of bullets? Endless talks and nothing settled. Gasoline prices up if things drag on. It's more than this is what he said he wouldn't do. Mr. Trump's supporters have always enjoyed his air of certainty. Nothing is that complicated. His common sense would rout the deep state swamp creatures. Now he looks as if he doesn't know what his next move is. He's uncertain. He doesn't look competent. As for the economy, the polls say what you see with your eyes, that the cost of living is the public's leading concern. There's also an edifying poll this week from Reuters Ipsos saying that among registered voters, 37% said Democrats had the better approach to the economy and 36% Republicans. It echoed a startling Fox News poll last month in which Democrats led Republicans on the economy by 54% to 45%. Fox reported it was the Democrats' largest advantage on that question since 2006. This is when Mr. Trump's famous brand is the billionaire businessman who knows money better than all the rest and knows how to create the conditions of prosperity. All of this would have some impact on the outcome of the upcoming midterms. Everyone knows it's hard for an incumbent president to hold on to Congress, but a year ago the Senate looked pretty solid for the GOP, and suddenly there are a lot of competitive House races. Not so long ago, all the energy was with MAGA, the insurgents who went up against the establishment in the big rebellion, the big rebuke. But it's the progressive left trying to claim that role now, and with a similar ideological chestiness. We'll see how many they speak for, but it matters in politics where the energy and fervor are, where the hunger is. An insurgency that becomes a government is eventually responsible for conditions. MAGA, as a force, has been around more than a decade. You can't blame everything that doesn't work on the bad governance of the past when the past is fast receding and your candidates have been controlling Washington for a while. It is said that in politics, friends come and go, but enemies accumulate. In a presidency, good news comes and goes, but bad news accumulates. ICE excesses, Epstein, Ukraine, Iran, inflation, tariffs. None of these things have ever destroyed Donald Trump, but when you've been in office a while, people start seeing not individual and discrete issues, but a rolling blur of problems, one after another. And they start to think, this feels bad, out of control, or I don't like his performance. That is the incumbent problem. Here is the things past problem. Everyone knows a post-Trump world is coming, about 2 years after the November election. This lessens his mystique. His future is finite, knowing that people reposition themselves, feel less fear. Mr. Trump has always had a hearty appetite for combat, and there is no reason to believe that will change. Combat is his default political mode. But more is needed now because competence, not combat, seems to be the growing issue. He has taken at rallies to calling the Democrats communists. Does labeling them this way help his party's position? Or would it help to explain exactly what the progressives' platforms and past statements contain? He continues to have no patience for cool, careful argumentation. I think the single most revealing statement Mr. Trump has made in his second administration is the one reported in Regime Change, the deeply reported history of the first half of the second administration by Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan. Mr. Trump was talking to Tucker Carlson by phone in the weeks before the Iran war commenced. Mr. Carlson was trying to warn the president against military action. Mr. Trump said, "I know you're worried about it, but it's going to be okay." Mr. Carlson asks how he knew. Mr. Trump replied, "Because it always is." Things just break his way. It is hard to understand such a breezy gloss on history or on life. Presidents don't say that kind of thing because presidents are precisely the people who learn each day that many things don't work out for the best. Mr. Trump seems to have a real fear of boredom. Even at his age, he is restless. When there's peace and quiet, he seems to become anxious, as if he can't tolerate normality. He shows little faith in quiet progress, as in set good policy in place and hope it succeeds inch by inch. Instead, he creates drama or a crisis, arouses a counterforce, attacks this new enemy, experiences fear. Will my luck hold? Defeats the new enemy, feels relief, relaxes. Then restless again and on the prowl, he creates new drama. That is a real weakness in life, needing drama. It will find you on its own. When you need it, you're always generating new stakes, and in a presidency, they're often high, and when you fail, that is some big failure. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the August 17th issue of the Wall Street Journal. We read from the Wall Street Journal every Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. Your reader has been Corrine. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day or evening.